I'm Aaron Hesmer of Flat Track Canada.
I'm Steve Beattie of 26 Suspension.
This is an all-new 2016 CRF Honda 450. We're converting it from a motocross bike to a flat track racer. So before we get into this build, Steve, why don't you tell us what we need to do to convert these bikes?
Aaron, what we're going to do here is we've got a 2016 CRF 450 Honda, and in today's dirt track world, it's fairly easy to take these things to the racetrack. What we're going to do is pretty much get some 19-inch wheels strapped on this thing front and back. From there, my job is to lower the suspension down to a dirt track spec, and at that point in time, honestly, you can strap a steel shoe on and you're ready to go.
So what we did here was remove the suspension. All it did was took us about 20 minutes. All I did was loosen up the subframe, remove the exhaust. We didn't take the subframe off completely, we just slid the shock out from the back. Steve, what did you do in the front?
Just front wheel out, took the brakes off, pitch bolts out with front forks. So a total of 20 minutes. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to disassemble the shock, but first of all I'm going to talk a little bit about the shock absorber. So it's for 2016 and 15 as well. Honda changed the shock from years previous, where in the past it always had a rebound dampening adjuster here at the bottom of the shock under the motorcycle. You always had to get on your knees in the dirt, whatnot, to adjust the rebound dampening. Now the new change is they've put everything here at the top of the shock. You've got your high, your low speed, and your rebound adjustment all at the top of the shock now. So that's a good feature they've done for 2016. Okay, so we've got the shock all apart now. As you can see, there's the shock shaft. In here is the shock shims, so that's all the valving for the shock. It determines the compression and the rebound damping inside the shock. So for dirt track, we changed it a little bit because there's a lot slower shock speed than you would see in motocross trim. So I've got to go and adjust the valving to a dirt track spec. With the other thing we've got to do is we've got to take some travel out of the motorcycle. Ideally, it's about 12 inches of travel in stock trim. We're going to take it down to about 8 inches of travel. So we're going to eliminate 4 inches of travel in the shock. To do so, I've got to go onto the lathe back here and spin up a spacer, limiter, so that when it's all back together, it's only got 8 inches of travel. Okay, so in the old days, some of the guys would use aluminum. You know, an aluminum slug inside the shock. I've found that this engineered plastic, it's called Delrin, is a lot more friendlier inside. It doesn't, first of all, I'll make this, the way I trim the spacer up to go inside the shock, it's going to be a press fit, so there's no movement in there, so it's not wearing on the shaft or anything like that. So if you ever wanted to take the motorcycle from dirt track trim back to motocross, you just remove the slug that I'm going to build, and there's no wear that, you know, from say an aluminum or a steel slug that maybe other people have used. So that's my method. Okay, so was just back there on the lathe and built myself the limiter spacer, so that's going to shorten the shock down to the 8 inches of travel that we spoke about. That goes on here, rest of the shim stack. Once I make the spec for dirt track, it goes on. Everything's going to go back into the shock with 5-weight fluid that I use. Bleed it all, the shock will be done. I'm going to put actually an aftermarket spring. We bumped the spring rates up quite a bit in flat track as well. So stock's probably 5.4 kg, and I think we're going to go up to about a 6.870 is what we're going to run in flat track. Okay, as you can see here, the difference in the spring, stock one's quite long. So by shortening the shock internally 25 millimeters, I've got to use a shorter spring. It again bumped the spring rate up, and I have to run a collar on top of the spring because I can't get a 9-inch spring. So we utilize 8-inch springs from Hypercoil and spacer on top, and then assemble the shock, and that's how it goes together. Here we are, we've got the fork apart now. In 2013, Honda, along with many other manufacturers, have gone to an air fork. So what you see here is all the internals less the mainspring of, you know, when they had spring forks. So everything's now held up with air pressure. To lower it, it's somewhat similar as in the past. I've got to build a spacer like you see right here. That is 115 millimeters long, and it's going to limit my travel 115 millimeters from what it was stock. Inside there's a balance spring. I have to do a little modification to the balance spring, and then again, like the rear shock, we go ahead and adjust the valving on the compression adjuster, or on the compression damping, the rebound dampening, and the mid valve. From there, put it all back together, change the oil heights a little bit for flat track, again because it's a lower front fork, and bolt it all back up on the motorcycle, and off you go.
So we're looking at the 2016 CRF 450 Honda, set up in flat track trim. Steve Beattie here is going to give a few laps. He's an expert racer in the Flat Track Canada series.
Yeah guys, what you see here is the finished product. As we spoke when I was working on it in the shop, doing all the suspension mods. Here it is in one piece now together. Bike's lowered down in flat track trim. It's got the 19-inch wheels front and back. And what you see here is pretty much a 2016 CRF 450 Honda ready to go flat tracking.